So I want to start out at a really pretty broad level and then sort of focus down to what I work on directly. I'm staff at the California Energy Commission, so a lot of what I'm going to say here is my opinion and not necessarily the opinion of the Energy Commission as a whole. So I just want to make that disclaimer. So a lot of what the Energy Commission does and we're working on is planning for future energy needs and also making sure that we can address our current energy needs. At the statewide level, we do a lot of work on this. And I'm going to start talking about a little bit at the statewide level and then quite a bit more about what the CEC is doing. And then I'm going to focus down on what efficiency division in the CEC, which is the division I work in. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the load management standard, mostly because that's what I work on directly, but also because I think it's pretty exciting. So if we can go to the next slide. So we have, three groups in the state that work pretty directly on electricity supply. That's like Peter's talked about in the previous presentation, the Energy Commission, the Public Utilities Commission, and the California Independent System Operator. So the PUC works mostly on, as far as reliability and keeping the lights on. They're really working on increasing renewability generation, incorporating reliability. They have a lot, they oversee the demand response programs, which is programs where we pay people to use less energy at particular times of day for during grid emergencies. They also have a new piece of work they're doing that's really related to the load management standard, and that's a dynamic rates for demand flexibility. The idea there is that, over the next few years, we'll develop some new rates that really encourage use of electricity when it's available and it's clean. The ISO is really focused on reliability. The independent system operator is, absolutely laser focused on keeping the electricity on at all times. They have a Western US interconnection so that California can share electricity or sell and buy actually, but all across the Western US, and that really helps to sort of smooth out loads. If there's if it's hot in California and cool in Washington, we can import some energy, or in the other times of day, they can take it from us during the middle of the day when we have a lot of solar. They oversee electricity transmission, and also I'm sure you've all heard about flex alerts. We saw a lot of them last summer, including a generalized alert that was a little beyond the usual flex alert. So the ISO also runs that flex alerts program. So if we can go to the next slide. So I also want to talk as far as in context at a statewide level. California has a lot of pretty major goals for getting to, a clean grid in the next 20 or so years. So right now we have a 60% renewable generation goal that's coming up pretty soon, 2030. We just voted, this commission just voted in a 7,000 megawatt load flexibility goal. So that's actually right now that's about 8% of the, about 15% of the total need on a high peak day. So actually that load flexibility goal really goes a long ways to making the grid reliable without having to build new generation. Then we're also working towards 100% of new vehicles being emissions-free by 2035. Expect most of those to be electric, but there could be some hydrogen vehicles as well. And then our longer-term goal is this 100% carbon-free grid by 2045. That's related to the SB 100 goal, which I'll talk a little bit about later on. So if we can go to the next slide. So the CEC is really looking to provide for the electricity needs of the state of California. A lot of the way that we look at that is through what we call capacity, making sure that there's enough generation to electricity generation to provide for the electricity needs, or to help people reduce their needs during high peak periods in order to reduce the amount of capacity that we actually need to build. So load flexibility and energy efficiency actually help a lot with capacity. The other thing is reliability and resilience. So reliability is the idea that we want electricity to be flowing to your house absolutely as much as possible, or your business. And that the grid doesn't, you're not losing electricity any more than you possibly need to. Resilience is a little bit deeper in terms of, in the longer term, can we make a grid that's consistently reliable and resilient to things like climate change, big peak load needs, and other stuff. So we work on that at the CEC by doing generation, transmission, and distribution planning. CEC is mostly focused on generation, so we do siting of new power plants and also oversee the changes in power plant operations. We do load flexibility, which load flexibility is really about getting businesses and customers to use electricity when it's cheaper and cleaner and more available, and use less electricity when it's expensive and dirtier. We've been pushing energy efficiency at the California Energy Commission since the very beginning, back in the late 70s. We do a lot of research on energy efficiency. And then the other thing is microgrids. We've been starting to put more research and time into developing support for microgrids. We have a couple of the tribal groups who have implemented microgrids in their areas, and we're seeing those come in for places like hospitals and others that really need the electricity at their location to never go down. So we've been working. This is a little bit of a newer direction that we're going. And then we're also working toward decarbonization and how that works with the previous stuff. So electric vehicles, encouraging more renewable generation and making that easier to get the permits done and interconnected to the extent possible, so that it's built and connected to the grid as quickly as is reasonable and appropriate. And then also encouraging distributed energy resources. That's things like solar on your roof. It can also be batteries. It can also be EVs plugged into the grid in a way that they can use their battery to support your home, keep the lights on at your house, or even to sell electricity back to the grid when it's really needed. And we also do a huge amount of research on all these topics and a lot of others as well. And next slide, please. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the select CEC projects. I'm not going to get too deep into these because there's a lot going on at the CEC. Since we're mostly focused on energy, it's no big surprise, but we're really focused on keeping the lights on, as well as making sure that new buildings are efficient and the electricity is reliable, and that we're getting toward a clean grid and clean transportation. So from the efficiency standpoint, one of the major things that we do is the building and appliance standards. The CEC develops the energy code every 3 years and puts out a new energy code. Those are really directed at efficiency, making sure that the changes are cost effective and helpful and very implementable in a broad standard, across both businesses, industrial and residential homes. We also have appliance standards that are appliance efficiency standards. We have a different kind of appliance standards we're just started up, and I'll talk about that in a second too. We do capacity planning. We were a big part of the recent SB 100 report. The SB 100 report is the report that talks about the goal of going to 100% clean energy by 2045. And so there's a lot of information in there. In fact, a couple of slides back, I had a plot that showed about how much capacity we're planning to build in California, and that came from the SB 100 report. So if you want to look at the plan, the statewide plan for how that's going to go, I suggest taking a look at that report. There's also some summaries if you don't want to read the whole thing. The integrated energy policy reports, this has been an ongoing thing that the CEC has done for a lot of years. These are reports that help policymakers understand what's going on in the state and also make a lot of recommendations for how to improve things. And so if you want to, those sort of change topic every year. There's a different focus every year. So if you want to take a look at those, you can usually find something that talks about what you're interested in. Those are available at the CEC website along with the SB 100 report. We do a huge amount of research, primarily through the electric program investment charge. That's ratepayer funds from the investor-owned utilities. That is actually hundreds of millions of dollars a year worth of electricity and gas, mostly efficiency research, but also research into load flexibility, reliability, and keeping that, making sure that in the future we're moving in the right direction. Then the part that I'm working on more directly is load flexibility and reliability. A couple years ago, we spun up what's called the Demand Side Grid Support Program. That's a demand response program for emergencies. It pays people to reduce their energy use during those emergencies, and that's available to everyone that's not an IOU customer. So the local governments can sign up to participate in that, as well as the Distributed Electricity Backup Assets Program. That one's directed more at batteries, using batteries during emergencies, or even, I think they have generators in that, though I'm not sure. They've been trying to keep these pretty clean. But those are both emergency programs. Then there's the load management standards, which I'll get into later because that's my topic. And the other appliance standards, which are new, these are the flexible demand appliance standards. The whole idea here is to encourage appliances or require appliances that can flex demand when we need it. So they can use, the first one around that they're working on right now is pool pumps, and they're starting with a timer just that reliably moves electricity use away from peak hours and toward the middle of the day when electricity is cheaper and more available. They're going to look at a lot of other appliances as well, including thermostats, not refrigerators, AC systems, and I don't know the whole list, but there's quite a few appliances that they're planning to look at over time. I think the next one is actually going to be water heaters, electric water heaters, especially heat pump water heaters. So we can go to the next slide. We're going to talk.
Stefanie, you have like 5 minutes left, just to let you know.
Yeah, okay, I'll be quick.
Great.
I'm going to talk about load flexibility. Thank you for letting me know. Load flexibility, so let's go ahead and, this is the process of maintaining the balance of electricity and demand, electricity supply and demand by adjusting the demand rather than the supply. This has to be in balance all the time in order for the grid to operate. So our load flexibility needs to be something that can respond relatively quickly. If we go to the next slide, we have a lot of benefits for load flexibility. We can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by shifting to times of day when there's less emissions. We improve reliability, again, by shifting away from times when there's high demand. We can reduce overall systems cost both in transmission and distribution costs, because if we reduce the need, we can reduce the amount of grid that we have to build, and also reduce the number of power plants that we have to build. And then this also gives customers a choice to participate in this kind of program and likely save money on their electric bills. If we go to the next slide. We can flex load a few different ways. It starts out very simple with something as easy as a timer. The load management standards has been pushing one-way communication. That's the way we're going right now. It's the next step up from timer. I'll talk about that a little bit more. And then we also have automation plus two-way communication. All of these, as it goes up, we have more load flexibility potential and more flexibility on those days that we really need it. So if we go ahead and go 2 slides forward, and I'll talk about the load management standards. Thank you. So late last year in October, the CEC adopted the load management standards, and there's sort of 4 parts to this. This is all about load flexibility. So the first thing that we did is we built a rate database to maintain the accuracy of existing and future time varying rates in a publicly available and machine readable MIDAS rate database. We call it the MIDAS database. That's so that you can know, you can use that system to know what you're paying at a particular hour for electricity. We wanted to support third-party services, which means that they need to be able to know what rate you're on and what you're paying. So we're going to develop a standard rate information tool that supports those services. We're also requiring the IOUs, the investor-owned utilities, the 2 largest public-owned utilities, and the 12 largest CCAs, community choice aggregators, to provide hourly rates that do change, at least hourly, and that reflect wholesale marginal costs, and hopefully also things like greenhouse gas emissions. And then we also have customer outreach. So to make sure that people know about this, all the utilities are required to integrate information about these new time varying rates and automation technologies into their existing programs. So I'll go kind of quick on the last few slides here because I know I'm up on my time. The rate database, this looks complicated, and it is, but basically the idea is we're bringing in information from the utilities, from the ISO with the flex alerts, bringing in the greenhouse gas signal and all the rates, and we're making that available. The first step is through automation service providers. They'll take that from the MIDAS database and get it out to your homes and homes, businesses, and devices. The next step is thank you. So this next part is really about making sure that those automation service providers or other authorized parties can do things like look up your current rate, compare that rate to other rates that are available to you, and actually change that rate if you authorize them to do that. So this is a way to make it a lot easier for you to see what's available and choose a rate that makes it best for your home or business. Next slide. We've also, like I said, we required the hourly rates for the 17 named utilities in the load management standards. Those will all go into the MIDAS rate database. And then as the customers install automation, they can use those new rates and use that information from the MIDAS database in order to operate their homes, their businesses in a way that saves them money and improves grid performance. Here's the sort of process that it goes through to get to a real rate and people signing up for it. And then the last one, the next slide, is customer education. We're working with the utilities to make sure that they have customer education to make sure that everybody knows about this process, that it knows that these rates are available when they are. It'll be a few years. The process is not fast here. And also know that they can buy or be incentivized to buy price responsive automation technologies. Those could be lots of things, from thermostats, which the picture shows, to water heaters, to even refrigerators and things. So,
All right. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Sorry, ran over a little.
Great job.